there's a part in the book where you talked about tapping into flow states. I think you even said like the placebo.
Yes,
and something else,
hypnosis.
and hypnosis. So how do we tap into flow states, placebo effect, and hypnosis to start to manifest better?
So one of the points of those examples is to show that actually, very simply, you can get there without anything, right? I mean, hypnosis, you can, and you can do self-hypnosis, of course, but I'm sure most of the listeners are thinking of the guy who comes and he goes like this,
Yes. Yeah.
right? But that is how fast, if you train yourself to get access, and I talk about monks, and I talk about Wim Hof, you know, these people access the power they have within, and it takes practice and diligence.
Yes.
But the same processes are similar to hypnosis and the placebo effect. And the interesting thing about the placebo effect is that you can even know it's a placebo and it will still have the same effect.
And it still gets results.
Yes, yes. And so, and also, if you think about exercising a particular muscle group, your muscles will increase without you doing anything.
Wow, it's crazy.
You see, but this is the power, because the brain doesn't know the difference between what you're thinking and reality, right? So if you embed it in there, now that's not to say your muscles are going to get as big as an Olympic weightlifter, but they do increase in mass. And so getting access to these things within you that you don't appreciate is very, very powerful. And you talk about the flow state. You know, this is the state of being where everything aligns, right?
Yes.
And that's where we want to be. We're not paying attention to time. We're not paying attention to externalities. We're just doing it. Now, again, you don't want it to turn into, I've ignored everything in my life to get to that goal, but you want to live in a way in which things naturally come and you're living it, and it's a process that's all working together for you to manifest your goals.
Wow, that's beautiful. What is the most recent research about the placebo, and how can we use that science or data to impact our lives positively?
Well, again, and the weird thing about it is you don't even have to believe it and it will happen.
Wow.
Now, if you believe it's the real thing, it'll probably be more powerful.
Even better, yeah.
But again, it's embedding this belief into your head, and you know, there's a 6-week program in the book, but it gives you a step-by-step way to do that. And again, it's not one and done. You have to do the work. You know, although I say the universe doesn't give a fuck about you, I also would say God only helps those who help themselves, right? And you know, when I make that statement at the end of the book, basically my statement is, you are the universe, right? You are the power that decides. And again, it's understanding how much power you have within yourself. You know, there's we're talking about people getting stuck in things. You know, sometimes you cannot predict what's going to happen to you, but there's this attitude, it's called dispositional optimism. I don't know if you recall reading that, but it's understanding that things don't work on our timeline, and having a constant state of an optimistic view of the world, again, that aligns you because it keeps you in this constant state of engagement of your parasympathetic nervous system. And again, if you can live in that state and look through the world through that lens, your physiology is going to be at its best, your longevity is going to be increased, you're going to be much happier in terms of purpose and meaning in your life. You know, nothing, or at least I can't imagine nothing worse than, you know, being a crotchety old man still chasing 20-year-old women,
Right.
having 3 or 4 Ferraris. And actually, it reminds me, I'll tell you a funny story. I was in Aspen giving a talk, and one of the benefactors was an 80-year-old fellow, widower, who survived the Holocaust.
Wow.
And so he invites everyone up to his house. So, you know, you pull up to this huge mansion that's, you know, 20, 30 million.
Right. In Aspen.
In Aspen.
Yeah.
one of his multiple.
Sure.
So I go in there, and I had been one of the main speakers. So he comes up to me and starts talking, and he looks at my watch and he says, "See this?" He points to his watch, $1 million.
Jeez.
And I'm like,
who cares? Yeah. Who cares?
And he says, "Come here." And I said, "Okay." So he takes me out to his garage, and again,
Tons of cars
yeah,
and yeah.
And I'm looking at him, and then he starts saying, I've never been happy. And I said, "Okay." And he goes, he tells me about actually his tragic Holocaust experience and how he, married this woman, but he was never in love or passionate, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, "I'm miserable. I'd do anything to be happy."
Wow.
Okay. And I said, "Okay." And he says, "Can you do anything for me?" And I said, "Yeah, I can." I said, "If you spend 10 hours with me, I will give you that gift." Okay. So he says, "Really?" And I say, "Yeah." He says, "Well, how much will it cost?" And I said, "It'll cost $100,000 an hour." Okay. He looks at me and says, $500,000.
An hour or total?
No, total.
Yeah,
Well,
half.
it was, yeah, it
You
was
wanted
half.
half,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I said, "No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's $1 million, and I'm guaranteeing you.
Wow.
And so his daughter is there, and she overhears our talk, and she comes over and she says, "Papa, this is like a neuroscientist. He studies this. You should do this." And he looks at her and he says, "Foolish girl, you don't know anything about money." And he says, I have to save this money for you." And she looks at him and she goes, "I have everything I need. I don't need anything." And she goes, "Do it." And he goes, No. You're foolish." And my point is, here was an opportunity for him to learn something, to get what he said he absolutely wanted, yet his own selfish self-interest and drive overpowered anything to actually give him what he wanted.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, he had a belief. He had an identity around what he thought he needed to hold on to, which was more money.
Yeah. But that was what always was making him happy or unhappy his whole life.
Exactly. But it gave him a sense of false security or status or influence or power or something.
Well, unfortunately, though, there are people like that. But the reality is, all the people around them are laughing at them.
Yeah, and they are making the people around them more miserable, probably.
Oh yeah, well, because they have to win, right? $1 million. You know.
That's to one up everyone else.
Yeah, and that's a very classic thing. In fact, I'm not being critical of Warren Buffett, but there's a story that his wife wrote that said, he was never interested in the money. He was interested in winning.
The game. The game of winning.
Right. And, it's not always about winning sometimes. It's about caring for others, understanding people, being of service. Imagine somebody who has that degree of wealth, what he could have done to, let's say, fund an orphanage or help the people who can't afford food in Aspen.
Right.
And it would have been a minuscule amount.
Small compared to what he actually had. Yeah. Wow. This idea of identity, we start to build our identity as children in our teens and our 20s. How do we start to identify what our identity actually is and how it is empowering us or disempowering us in this pursuit of manifesting?
Well, the problem is for many people is that they have bonding and attachment issues that have been imprinted on them.
Yeah, and anxious or avoidant attached.
Yes. Yeah, and so they don't appreciate, look, when you're growing up and, 7 or 8 years old, you're not understanding this.
Yes.
But these types of connections, they get deeply embedded and you carry it with you. And so one is you have to make the effort to understand. As an example, I'm sure some of the listeners go, "Oh, well, now I have a little idea because I keep choosing this jerk to be a partner with."
Yes.
Well, why do I do that? And you have to sort of go backwards
and self-reflect. And
I was giving a talk one time, and there was a woman. She raised her hand. We were talking about this exact issue, and she started crying. And she said, my father, when I was a kid, told me I would be nothing.
Wow.
Right.
So sad.
Yeah, it's horrible. And this is what people need to understand. Words matter to children. And so the woman said, my whole life I've spent trying to be something.
Wow.
She said, I became a nurse. I got a PhD. She's a senior executive at a hospital chain, right? She's doing extraordinarily well. And her whole life has been trying to overcome that baggage. And imagine the difference, though, if her father said, you are amazing. You can do anything you want. I am so proud of you. I envision you doing incredible things. And how the 30 years of her life, or whatever it's been, 40 years, would have been one of love and connection and feeling worthy, versus every day waking up repeating, I was told I would be nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess there's a question within that, is if you are given all the love and empowering affirmations and words from your parents that you can do and be what you want to be, versus you don't have what it takes, you're never going to amount to anything, you disappoint me, you need to do better. Which one drives the person to create bigger or better results or impact? Because she has lived a life of impact, but it's from a place of lack, right?
Sure.
Would she be as driven to grow and expand and reach beyond what she felt she was capable of if she had all the love in the world? I guess that's the question.
Well, of course, in that case, we can't specifically answer that. But yeah, there's no question that, I used to have a coach when I was a rower crew. Okay. And I used to have a coach who would just scream at me all day.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Well, and it's
I had that
exactly
in
what we're,
football, too.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's the
exactly
worst.
what we're talking. Did that make you strive and work harder? It just made you feel like the guy's a jerk. I
Yeah.
hate the guy.
I was living in
do
fear,
what I have.
too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And versus then I had a different coach. The new coach was an extraordinary human being, one you would model yourself after. He won the gold medal in the double sculls in Melbourne in '52, I think it was. And, he was like, listen, you need to work on this, but I know when you do this, you're going to excel here. You're doing an amazing job. I can just tell you're really into this. I'm so proud of you, right?
It's more fun, too.
Yeah, of course. So can you get a similar result? Yeah, but it's like, somebody putting a backpack to keep stabbing you in the back your whole life, saying, get going, versus somebody who's hugging you and embracing you and telling you how much they love you. Yes, you can do incredible results from horribly mean people, but that's not a long-term strategy.
Yeah, and it's not a healthy life.
No.
There's probably a lot of stress and anxiety and chronic pain that you're carrying with that energy, with that vibration, which you talk about in the book, the vibration. And when we can get into flow state, we're able to really create more abundance and in a harmonious way.
Exactly.
Not in a hard way of grinding constantly to accomplish and then feel exhausted when we get to the top.
Yeah, and so then, instead of having accomplished and going, that son of a I showed you, you're sitting there, God, I'm happy to have, God, it felt so good, and I'm just so happy I was able to do this. It's a completely different way, and I would hope that people want the other way, where it's one of positivity and encouragement,